And thanks for joining us. Our guest with us this morning, Davidson County District Attorney Glenn Funk. Good to have him on. Talking this morning about an issue, and you know, we are in an election cycle right now. And of course, a lot of talk, you know, with candidates in the aftermath of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to reverse Roe v. Wade is abortion rights and abortion laws and how it works in Tennessee. And he's kind of laying out for us what appears to still be 2 months after the trigger law went into effect here with a very strict law in Tennessee. A lot of confusion. The DAs, you're going to be talking about it this week. You're going to be maybe giving a presentation on it. Well, just before we get into just your take on it and the way you would approach it if there was a case that came across your desk in Davidson County, which I guess you don't know that one will, but if one did, how would you handle it?
Right. Well, you know, I think that the criminal law is all about public safety. Right? I want to prosecute rapes and the murders and the armed robberies. Right? My job is to make sure that people here feel safe. And too often, I think sometimes people try to insert the criminal law into areas where it shouldn't necessarily be. Well, one of those is in a consultation room between a woman and her doctor. Right? What in the world? Why in the world would a DA be involved in that conversation? Why would a legislature be involved? Why would anybody other than that woman and her doctor be involved in that conversation? You know, why have I spoken out on this to some extent? Well, you know, when the Dobbs decision came out, right, my daughter called me in tears. She said, "Dad, I love this state. I was born here. I live here, right? This is where I work. But I don't feel safe right now," right? So I spoke up at that point because our job is to try to make sure that folks feel safe living in this community. That's why we publicize the Vanderbilt rape case. That's why we publicize when we're successful on the Waffle House mass shooting, right? Because we want folks to know that, hey, if someone's hurting other people, that we're going to do what we can to make sure that people feel safe. Well, this is similar to that, right? I want folks to feel safe, all right? If there's a pregnancy that a woman and her doctor feel is appropriate, that they need to terminate that, whether it's for her life, whether it's for any of the myriad considerations that somebody has, I want those doctors and those women to understand that I'm not going to come in and try to put somebody in the penitentiary over it. I think that's a very simple analysis of what my job as district attorney is. And, you know, this has a chilling effect, not just, I mean, for the 51% of the population that's female, but for the doctors, for the hospitals, for the med schools, Vanderbilt and Meharry. How are they training their OBGYN students, right? What are those folks learning? How can they properly help their future patients when they're coming out of med school? It has all these ripple effects. And what I'm trying to make sure that people know is I want best practices for medicine to be able to continue, and I want doctors to be able to have those types of conversations with their patients.
Now, there are some who have heard you say as much, and that will say, we understand you want to play the role of protecting the public and doing what's right for these individuals, and they'll say, well, don't you have a responsibility under the law the way it is now to protect these unborn children?
Right. And so the situation here is I want to make sure that women and their doctors can make good quality health decisions going forward, right? When it comes to the cases that may be brought to me, right, we evaluate every case, every file that's brought to us by any law enforcement agency, whether it's one of the state agencies, whether it's Metro Nashville Police Department. We evaluate every case based on its merit. So I have not been able to conceive of any case that would be brought to me under this law that would be so would require there to be some sort of criminal prosecution. But we'll look at every one of those. But I'm saying that I'm not going to prosecute any woman or doctor for making a health decision based upon their conversations and what their decisions are.
And and I understand that point, and is part of the reasoning behind that the law, the way you're reading it, has so many gray areas, it's hard to even get a handle if you wanted to prosecute.
Well, you know, we will see how this plays out. I mean, the legislature's convenes again in January, are they going to leave this law as it is, or are they going to make certain amendments, right? Some folks have reached out to the DA's conference. What about for a child who was raped, victim of child rape, who becomes pregnant, like the little girl who had to go to Ohio to get an abortion on that situation? And can they say that it is presumptively the life of the mother if it's a child under the age of 12? Well, that still sets up this competing interest between, you know, that 10-year-old little girl and this child under our law that might be 1 cell old, right? Because 1 cell old child is still a person under the Tennessee law. And so there are places where I think our legislature is going to have to address these issues. They were very clear when they passed these laws, and it might be that that's where our legislature stays. And then the question is going to be, what cases do prosecutors around the state bring? And then how do the courts treat those cases?
So to hear you talking right now, I mean, this law, the Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade. Tennessee has the Strickle law, one of the most restrictive abortion laws in this country. And yet it almost sounds to me, hearing you spell this out and bringing up some of the concerns and your approach to it, that there isn't a law that's workable in the state. It's on the books, but that it's tangibly not happening, except it's chilled, and there are far fewer abortions, obviously, if any, happening in Tennessee medically in a hospital, but that there's chemical ones. I mean, is that kind of how you view it? I mean, in Davidson County, are abortions really illegal?
Well, so what will happen is someone will show up to a hospital, maybe dozens or hundreds of people over the next year will show up at hospitals that are the unlucky 5%, right? Then Department of Health or somebody who hears about it will then report it to a district attorney. The district attorneys across the state will make a decision. If any district attorney decides to prosecute, right, then all of a sudden there's going to be a test case, and we'll see what the courts do. You know, the law says a woman cannot be prosecuted if the abortion was performed on her. But what if she actually performed the abortion herself? What if she, got the coat hanger out, right? Or did a chemical coat hanger, which is the 2-pill abortion, and ends up, was it performed upon her, or did she perform it on herself? And does that now make her liable under the abortion statute? Well, we don't know that yet. It's going to be up to a decision made by some prosecutor somewhere to go forward. If any prosecutor goes forward, then the courts are going to weigh in, and we'll see what happens at that point.
We'll take a break. When we do, we'll start taking some phone calls as well. More of our conversation on this issue, on what happens under Tennessee's abortion law, and how DAs, Davidson County and Glenn Funk, will handle it. We'll be back with more right after this.